Hey, startup founders, early stage entrepreneurs, and impact leaders. I'm your host, Ian Scott Cohen. Welcome back to the official podcast of the Founder Underground, where we aim to give founders the tools and knowledge they need to succeed without all of the BS of VCs, accelerators, tech bros, and the like. Today, I am joined by Seth Banks. Seth is the co-founder of TrueSeed, a trusted guide for early stage founders navigating the complex world of B2B sales. So Seth's mission is to help founders go from visionaries to revenue driving leaders by giving them the playbooks, frameworks, and confidence, most importantly, they need to execute effective sales strategies. He's got over a decade of experience leading enterprise sales and working with folks like Accenture, Google for Startups, a bunch of other places. Seth brings a ton of invaluable insights to any founder looking to scale. So we'll be diving into the art of founder-led sales, common mistakes to avoid, many of which I've made myself already, so happy to own up to that, and how to craft a sales process that actually closes deals. So Seth, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I mean, that was a great intro, man. Wow.
Yeah, man. I've got to put in some work, represent you guys well.
This is
But you
good.
honestly, you bring a lot to the table, and sales is one of those things that, obviously as a founder, early stage founders especially hate sales, right? It's like
Right.
it feels like you have to go in and be, like a stereotypical sales guy in your mind. You got to be pushy and
Right.
stuff, which obviously we'll talk about that and how that's not true. But also sales, as they say, the obstacle is the way. Sales is the way to
It
growth
is.
and to success. And so today we're specifically talking about B2B sales, but a lot of these
Hmm.
lessons are really generalizable to most sales in any form, I would argue.
Yeah.
So let's dive into it first. And actually, I want to do a quick background. What got you into sales in the first place, and what made you really focus on this with TrueSeed?
Wow, man. I mean, that's a whole podcast in itself. But I'll give you the short version.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually fell into it like most people in sales. You don't go to college saying, "Hey, I want to be in sales." No
Sure,
one ever
sure.
does that, right? So,
Right, right.
I happened to just fall into it. Ironically enough, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. Both of my
Yeah, me
parents
too.
are sales people, as well as my grandfather. So I've always been a people person.
Yeah.
And the first job, that I landed out of college was recruiting. And then from
Got
there,
it.
a recruiter reached out to me about a B2B sales tech position. And
Nice.
I didn't know anything really about the tech space outside of me wanting to be in it.
Sure.
And I started at the bottom, cutting my teeth as an SDR, then being promoted to an account executive. And once I saw that I was really good at it, just like most people in most things, when they find hidden talents for the first time,
Yeah.
they tend to stick to it because they like to win. And sales is definitely a win or lose day to day type of
Yeah.
thing. So
Right, right, right.
that's how I got adopted into the sales world.
Right on, right on. So SDR, we're talking about sales development rep, right?
Yes.
And so for those who aren't familiar, walk us through what an SDR does and then what an account executive does, just to set the scene.
Yeah, sure. So SDRs are really, your worker bees for the sales organization. I mean, they are the life that's going and hunting for all of the big fish
Mm,
and medium-sized fish to bring back for the account executives to be able to close. So they're building the pipeline for those account executives, making sure that those leads are qualified against, the ICP, ideal customer profile,
yep.
characteristics, as well as reaching out to the right buyer personas. But they really take that time to hone down on their communication skills and also how to position the value proposition in order to convert via calls and also emails.
Great, great. Yeah, I love that explanation. And obviously, when we talk about founder-led sales, founders tend to be all of these positions at once, right?
Right.
So we'll
Yes.
get into that. I'm curious what then, after being an account executive yourself, what has led you to really want to focus on helping startups and their founders unlock sales with TrueSeed?
Yeah, man, I think that's a great question for me. After becoming an account executive, selling, to small businesses and then medium-sized businesses and then ultimately enterprise, it was always a ladder, right? It was always one
Mm,
more step up. And so once I
right.
sold enough enterprise deals and the fun kind of went away from that, I got the opportunity to become a sales director to an early stage startup. And so a lot
Gotcha.
of the knowledge that I took from those past account executive and SDR positions, I transferred directly into that early stage startup. And then I started to find a trend between founders that, basically sales methodology and processes was like Mandarin to a lot of early stage founders, right? They just didn't
Yeah.
understand any of the language at all. And
Right.
there was my newfound, like challenge, right? How can I help educate founders to become great closers because they have great products, and it's so much easier to now train and then see a win for someone else. So it's kind of like, hey, I've been able to do this well. Now let me see if I'm really good at it by teaching someone else how if they can be good at it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And when I heard that you were working with Goodie Nation, which is where we met, I
Yeah.
was like so ecstatic because I'd already been talking to people. I was like, we need more structure, more rigor, like teach people how to do these things. And
Right.
sales should be the number one thing that we teach people how to do
Hmm.
because their business depends on it. So
I
I'm
agree.
a huge fan, huge fan. So let's start into some of these questions I have for you. So what's the number one mistake, most commonly you see amongst early stage founders that they make when they're selling their product to businesses, and how can they avoid that?
Man, there's definitely a lot of them, I would say.
Yeah,
But
sure.
let's start off probably with one that I see the most, right? The biggest mistake I see all the time is founders focusing too much on their product and not enough on the
Mm,
customer's actual problem, right?
got it.
So
Okay.
they'll go into a pitch talking about features, how cool their tech is, or
Yep.
why they built it. But the
Right.
buyer is sitting there thinking, oh, okay, like how does that solve my problem?
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
the best
Right.
way to avoid this is actually flipping the conversation. You have to start by just understanding the pain that your ideal customer is facing and then tie that product back to that. That's going to make the sales process, very much so customer led instead of a product led
Yep.
process, right? And
Yep.
so, simple way to test if you're doing this right is basically if you're talking more than the buyer in the first half of the call, you're probably selling too soon.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, I see it all the time. I definitely did it myself. Where, because you're a founder and you're obsessed with your product and your vision for what your product can do for people. And so
Yep.
for some reason we immediately, and you're probably used to talking to investors and advisors who want to know about the product and the market.
Mm-hmm.
And so you tend to go into these things and think, oh, they have as much enthusiasm about a new tool as I do. It's like, no,
Right.
they don't give a shit about a new tool. They just want to
1000%.
they care about their job and what they're trying to get done, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I see that all the time too. What are some ways, like if somebody's been doing that and kind of banging their head against the wall,
Mm-hmm.
are there any? So when you work with somebody, let's go with that route.
Yeah.
How do you get them to kind of step back and say, all right, let's reground ourselves and do a different approach? Where do you start with them?
We start with the ICP, right? For me, I need to
That's ideal
understand.
customer profile, as you mentioned before.
Yes, ideal customer profile. We start with the characteristics and understanding what are the challenges that your ideal customer profile and your buyer personas are experiencing in their day to day or their strategic objectives, right?
Yep.
And or initiatives. And from there, we basically back into or reverse engineer the conversation. So we like to ask questions that set up the alley oop and also the qualification to see if they're a prospect worth further speaking to in the sales process, right? With these questions that would give us the position to come in and now deliver a proposition, right, to help solve that problem, right? So
Got
we
it. Got it.
we want to we want to know if they're experiencing what we intuitively believe that they're experiencing. If I can get them to turn themselves into doctors in that first call by assessing everything that the patient is experiencing before giving a recommendation, then that shifts the conversation from the beginning. You can have more confidence because you're really looking to learn versus have your own agenda by pushing out a product that you believe is best for them without them telling you what it is that they're experiencing.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love the doctor metaphor. I know we've talked about that offline before,
Yeah, we have.
and we're gonna go into it in a second. But I love the way you're framing it because a lot of times, you go into it thinking it's a presentation,
Yeah.
right? But it's not.
Yeah, it's not.
It's meant to be an investigation almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so with the doctor metaphor, it's like, okay, we need to get them to describe their symptoms, if you will, and kind of diagnose the problem
Right.
so that it can fit into what you're selling potentially,
Right.
right? And so can you give us some examples of like, what kind of questions you might even ask, and you can use an example as you've done before, just generic terms. I'm
Yeah.
curious how that starts out typically.
It typically starts out with after a little bit of rapport building and depending on where the lead comes from, if it's an outbound lead, which is basically cold, you reached out with some
Yep.
type of messaging and someone replied to you and said, hey, I'll be interested in taking this discovery call.
Sure.
you know, the first question is, hey, what drove you to want to take this
Yeah.
call today?
Yeah. I
Right?
love that
Like
question. Yep.
that gives you so much. And open-ended questions are your best friend, right?
Yep.
And so the more that I can get out of a prospect, and understanding why they wanted to take the call, you know, of course you have some of your sticklers who don't like to give you a lot of information. They want you
Hmm.
to just pitch them.
Yeah.
And that's a different conversation of how you avoid that. But basically it's, hey, what are you experiencing, right? This is what we're seeing
Right.
happening in the space. And, you know, we believe that you know, we need to change the way that we're doing things. And so I would love to know how you all are experiencing this problem. And if those indicators are the same as what you all have seen, you know, are typical traits of customers who end up buying your product, then you're probably having the right type of conversation with the right person.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. I mean, it's one of those things where, and I've worked with people on this too, where if you're on a call with someone,
Hmm.
they've decided to give you their time, so there's a reason
Hmm.
that they are there.
Right.
And if you're not sure what it is, then ask, right? Like,
Right.
there's no harm in asking. And I
Hmm.
think whether it's outbound or inbound, if you've got them in a conversation, they obviously have some sort of motivation.
Yeah, they
And
looked at your website. They know something
yeah,
about you. Something
right.
piqued their interest for sure.
Right. So you use the term qualify, which, in sales, we're always trying to qualify a lead to make sure they're
Hmm.
a good fit for what we have to offer, right? Can you
Right.
tell us more about that? Because I know for, early stage folks, any lead feels qualified because you just want money, right? And you need to
Right.
make sales. But tell us a little bit about qualification, how we might think about it.
Yeah, well, you know, I think about it like dating, man. You know, like just because you're on a Tinder app doesn't mean that we're a good fit.
Yeah.
No, no, you know,
Right.
we're
Right.
all in the same place, but it doesn't mean that we're the right fit, right? So just like you have questions when you're dating someone and you're getting to know them and making sure that they align with what you believe in is the same way that I approach sales, right? So
Yeah.
qualifying for me is, you know, I actually like to switch what qualifying is. Normal people would qualify in. I like to qualify out.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I can weed out with red flags, you know, certain characteristics or things that are happening in their organization that would tell me that this product or solution isn't the best for them, and then direct them to maybe a solution that would be best for them, I'm
Sure.
becoming more of a friend,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm becoming someone that I am building a relationship with because I'm letting them know typical sales people get a bad rep by forcing their agenda, right?
Right.
But if I
Right.
can understand what you have and what you have going on and then saying, hey, this might not be the best solution for you, but there are other products in the space that I think do really well in what you might be looking for, right?
Yeah.
That is a great way to qualify. Now psychology tells us that when you tell someone that you have something that's not best for them, they automatically start to justify to themselves why they should opt in and why it is for them.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it's really reverse psychology because now they're selling you on why they're good for your product or your solution.
Right. And plus
And then
you've
you
won
can
their
verify.
trust a little bit because you've demonstrated it's like, oh, this person's not like
Bingo.
sell or die here. It's, they're just
Yep.
talking to me like I'm a real person. Yeah. Yeah, I
Exactly.
love that. We're 2 for 2 on metaphors here. I like the dating metaphor too because, it's one of those things like you learn this after you make some initial sales is that
Hmm.
some customers like you get into bed with them, you may have like a one night stand, you got like a 1 year contract or whatever, sell them
Hmm.
some licenses, and then you regret it, right? It's like it's not
One
going
thousand
anywhere.
percent. Yeah.
You don't want to talk to them. You want to let it like fizzle. You're like, I don't
Hmm.
need this person. Go, let's ghost each other around budget time,
Yep.
because it just doesn't fit, right? Sometimes they're not
Yeah.
using the product the way that you need them to,
Right.
or they're causing too many problems. But you did mention that you like to qualify out. I think that makes total sense. So can you give me an example or two of like something you may have heard or something somebody might say that makes you start to question, okay, are they in the right place for my solution? Again, I know
Yeah.
it's hard to do it generally, but
Sure.
curious if you have any examples.
I mean, if I was just to take a stab at this, usually, if they haven't prioritized budget around that problem, then it to me. I know that we are a long way.
Mhm. What does
You know,
prioritizing budget look like in a conversation?
so I like to talk to prospects. It depends on what type of solution that you have, but I
Sure.
generally like to talk to prospects and have them tell me that this is something they've been experiencing and they've been trying to solve. That's a great green flag for me, right?
Yep.
What have you
Okay.
done? Why didn't it work? What do you think could have been better? Right? That's a
Hmm.
lot of ammunition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some companies will tell you, "Hey, this is just interesting to me." if they tell you that they're getting ready to hire somebody, to solve that problem, things like that are indicators where you're like, okay, this might be a conversation to just nurture over time, right?
Yeah.
Because they're in the middle of experiencing the problem for their for the first time. Again, if we go back to dating, sometimes you have really great success with dating someone who has dated someone that they didn't want to be with over and
Yeah.
over again. So when they
Sure.
finally date you, they're like, oh wow, this is exactly what I've been looking for, right? So
Yeah.
when some companies are in their very experimental stages of solving the problem, sometimes those are indicators to me that this isn't a good time for us to try to get this across the line unless they're really interested and they're opting in to want to try the solution because they believe that this is the right time.
Yeah. And again, it's as a founder, it's tough, right? Like if you get
Yeah.
a lead and you're in that conversation, like you start interpreting things in a
Hmm.
way that makes you feel like there's a possible sale there because that's what you go in wanting.
Exactly.
And it takes a lot of discipline to tell yourself they're not ready. I need to put them to the side for time's sake, right?
A ton. Yes.
Founders, like we assume, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just like us neurodivergent people, but you assume there's like endless time, right? I'll just put more
Yeah.
hours there. And
Yeah.
so, but you don't really, you learn to realize that like, yeah, the trade-offs on time is everything in the beginning.
Hmm.
And so if you're wasting time on leads that aren't qualified, that aren't a good fit, or aren't even close to actually buying something, that can be killer, right? And so
Yeah.
you've got to know when to walk away. And I think that's one of the hardest things for a founder to get their mind around. And so with that in mind, for founders without a sales background, which is a lot of them, what's the biggest mindset shift you think they need to make early on to, successfully get sales going, if not, lead them?
Well, I want to add on before I answer that question because you, you
Yeah.
you brought up something really important. Um, another question that helps save a lot of time is asking them if they were to implement a solution like yours, when would that be?
Yeah.
Right?
Timeline. Yeah.
Like, got to get the timeline. For a lot of founders, they're not using any guideline for qualifying their deals. And in the disco, for me, I always tell founders in that first call, you should be getting 3 out of 4 of BANT, BANT, which is budget, authority, need, and timing.
Yep.
Right? And so you want to have certain questions that give you that insight after you've had a conversation. You don't want to walk in the door asking immediately about budget, right? You got to have some
Yeah.
type of flow in the conversation. You have to earn that. And so I like to let founders know you have to earn the tough questions that you ask.
Yep.
But if you can get an understanding of timing and start to just feel when people are serious or not, it'll help you. But you have to pay attention, to those answers, right? Because
Yeah.
it'll give you the indicator of whether or not you're talking to someone who's ready to move quickly.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. BANT is a really solid framework to get
Hmm.
information, even just to frame how you think about sales calls.
Yep.
And if people who are new to sales haven't learned already from the first 10 minutes of this conversation, like anything, there's a level of expertise and skill that goes into this. But it's the
Right.
same thing with marketing, product, engineering, operations, whatever it is. There's always experts
Hmm.
and professionals who do it every day and get masterful at it. And no
Yes.
one's saying a founder needs to become a master, right? What we're
Right.
saying is you need to become good enough to get the ball rolling
Yep.
and get some sales so that eventually you can, build out a sales organization and really know what you're doing. So going back to that
Yeah.
mindset shift, are there other mindset shifts that you think founders need to take when they're starting to think about leading sales early on?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really the shift from I'm convincing someone to buy to I'm helping someone make a better decision. That's
Okay.
the
Yeah.
mindset shift, right? A lot of founders think sales is about persuasion, but really
Right.
it's about alignment, right? You're not trying to force your product on someone who doesn't need it. You're trying to find the people who have a problem you can solve and guide them to that right decision.
Yeah.
Whether that's buying from you or not. So once you stop seeing sales as a battle and start seeing it as a problem solving, you'll sell more and you'll build better relationships. That's a
Yep.
huge shift, man. A lot of sales is based off of confidence, right? Founders
Mhm.
tell me all the time, man, can I just hire you to sell? I'm like, you have this
Right.
confidence. You're not years away from being where I am. You're just skills away. And
Yeah.
you have to align yourself and understand. I think it's really important for us to set the landscape, right? Most sellers, they have been selling for years. So what you
Yeah.
see is an end product of someone going through so many no's, having so many conversations with their sales managers and their directors on how to sell better, right?
Right.
Failed deals, wins, right? Quarters, bad quarters, great quarters. those are years. And this is also, we're talking about account executives who start off cutting their teeth for a year and a half to 2 years, sometimes 3 years, being an SDR before they get the opportunity to move into an account executive
Right.
role where they're
Right.
purely selling,
Yeah.
right? So if
Yep.
you can if you can respect that journey, then I think it helps you to really learn from the experts in the game to teach you and to shorten your time to get to that level of skill set. But founders are the best sellers, honestly, because they
Mm.
created the baby, right? They created the product. They're going to evangelize the product better than anyone else possibly can, right? And we'll
Yep.
get into a little bit around like why founders, typically hire before they're supposed to. But
Right. Right. Right.
I like telling founders in the beginning stages, you are the best person for this objective to execute, like period. So let's get you situated, and how to put the ball in the basket. I'm going to teach you how to put the ball in the basket more and better.
Yep.
Right. And
Yep.
so those are the mindset shifts that can really help them early on position themselves to, slow down to speed up. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
slowing down to speed up.
Yeah, so some concepts you've mentioned so far is, if you're a founder doing sales, you're not walking in there trying to push your agenda. You're trying
Right.
to figure out what problem there is to solve and whether you're aligned on this is a good solution for them,
Yep.
right? Where you got to approach this like it's a craft, it's a skill set, and so
Mm-hmm.
you have to give yourself time to develop, and you also have
Yes.
to take the time to really learn some of these basics, which is why playbooks like what you guys have with TrueSeed can be so helpful, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's too many times. I don't know what it is about pop culture, but as founders, we all think, "Oh, I'm a founder. Like I need to do everything by myself," right?
Yeah. 1,000%.
And so what's funny is founders will tell themselves that and say, all right, I'm not going to reach out to anybody for help because I don't want to spend any money and I need to figure it out. That's what founders do.
Mm.
And then when it comes to sales, they're like, oh, but I hate sales. I don't want to do sales. So I'll hire a salesperson to do it.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, but these are not congruent thoughts. And so,
Mm.
you've got to really like the biggest part about being a founder in my mind is being humble, which
Mm.
which a lot of people mistake that for being, like submissive or compromising or, whatever. But it's really about being selfless
Mm-hmm.
and recognizing that, hey, this isn't about me. There are things that I can do to get better, and it's about
Right.
achieving a goal. It has nothing to do with me and my
Mm.
worth,
Right.
right? It's about or my product. This is really about figuring out how to do this thing well enough to make some
Mm-hmm.
progress. So with
Wow.
that in mind, let's you've worked with some great programs. We
Mm-hmm.
talked about Accenture, Google for Startups.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if there's a sales framework or strategy that consistently helps founders close deals faster. Now, obviously, that's kind of a loaded question. There's like a
Right.
lot in that. So feel free to modify it to whatever you think would be most helpful in this moment.
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, when I think about frameworks that could help founders close deals faster, I'm going to focus on problem, pain, payoff.
Okay.
Right? Really easy, like the 3 Ps, right?
Yeah.
Problem, that's of course clearly defining the issue your customer is facing. And pain is making sure they understand the cost of not solving it, whether that be a, money issue or a time issue, frustration issue, or a lost opportunity, right? It could be one of many things. And then the last P is payoff, which is showing them how your product removes that pain and what their world looks like after using it, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
if you can master that, you will close deals faster because now you're selling urgency and not just a solution,
Mm,
right? And
yep.
in my experience, when founders focus on this and they don't give too much too early, right? That's when they start to see a lot of, success. And what I mean by giving too much too early is
Yeah.
a lot of founders will start their sales process off with a demo, right?
Mm,
And in sales, you're
yeah.
actually taught that that's the worst thing that you can do,
Wow.
right? Because you just came to the table and gave them the cow and the milk and the ice cream and the butter, and they didn't earn it, right?
Mm,
And so it's almost like creating a checklist of what made me believe that they are ready to receive this awesome product solution demonstration that I'm going to share with them that perfectly aligns with what they have shared with me in
yep.
the previous call, revolving around their pain. And when they walk in, those founders, when they walk into those calls and they start to initiate demos, they usually demo vomit, right? And they like to just show you every single feature and why it's
Yeah.
cool. And because you put hours into this, you've talked to your engineer or your
Yeah.
product
Yeah.
team.
Yeah.
There's so much that you put into it, and there's so much excitement that you have. But I'm sorry to hurt those out there, but the people you're talking to don't care.
Right.
They don't
Right.
care about how fancy the product is. They care about how it's going to help them solve a pain. What's the
Yeah.
payoff? So you want to talk about specific features, right? Or workflows within your product or solution that solves that pain, and then outline what the payoff is. And again, you have to get those potential users, those potential buyers in the seat of using it and envisioning what it would be like if they had something like this in their day to day or their week to week, whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
problem, pain, payoff, don't give too much, leave little crumbs. And at the end of your discovery call, once you have an understanding of what the pain is, you can walk them through a high level deck and say, hey, I think you'd be really excited to see what we have. I think a demo would be worth your time. And we
Yep.
can specifically focus on X, Y, and Z. What's a good time for us to connect next week?
Yeah.
Right? That's a great way to move from discovery to demo, then demo to proposal to close, right? This
Yeah.
usually a nice framework for a sales cycle
Yeah.
model.
I love that. And just to repeat, no demos in your intro call.
No demos.
Yeah, it's
No
so funny
demos.
because obviously I made that mistake a gazillion times, but and I've seen people do it too. And then I reflected. I remember when I this clicked for me at my last startup was I was actually buying a product for my company,
Okay.
and it was like a user analytics product. So you
Mm-hmm.
plug into our SaaS tool, and it helps us figure out what users are doing, right?
Okay.
And it's an expensive product. I think it was like a $10,000 purchase
Mm-hmm.
for us, and so I remember vividly. I was on the first call. Like I filled out the little form, and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
"We'll reach out to schedule a call." And I was like, "Okay." They reach out. I get on the call. I'm talking to the guy, and he keeps asking me questions, and I'm trying to answer them, but I'm also like, "Yeah, man, but I would really just like to see the platform." And he's like, "Yeah, let me just ask you a couple more questions." And before we know it, we're half hour in. I haven't seen anything, and he's like, "Okay, well, look, what I'd love to do is set you up with our so and so who can walk you through a demo next time."
Mm.
And I was like, "Shit, all right, fine." And then then we hung up. I was like, I didn't even see the product.
Wow.
But what happened was I was like, all right, well, it seemed like it fit what I need. So he set me up with a demo. I met with the guy doing the demo, and lo and behold, I bought the product, right?
Wow.
And that product was a good product. We didn't use it well, but it was a
Mm-hmm.
good product.
Yeah.
But it was like one of those things, like wow, like that's the amount of discipline it takes to do that,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
Because as a founder, you think, oh, my product is what's special
Mm-hmm.
about this whole endeavor, right? This whole
Mm.
journey I'm on is my product.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't, like, if they just see it, they'll get it, right?
Right. Right. Like
And,
build it
and
and they will come.
yeah, and if I've got them right here, why not? I'll just show them a little bit. That'll hook them. It'll be done deal. Maybe I can skip
Mm-hmm.
ahead to the proposal part.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no,
Yeah. No.
because,
No.
you're crossing too many. I'm trying to think of a good way to put it, but you're trying to do too much too fast, right? It's
Yeah.
trying to like sleep with your date after the first drink, and it's
Yeah.
like, hey, maybe you need a couple of dates first before you even think about getting in bed with them. Call
Right.
me old school, but to complete our Tinder metaphor, maybe not Tinder if you're looking for some chivalry. But
Right.
anyways, we're getting off track here.
I mean,
Uh,
if you think to your point, right? If we can put ourselves in a mindset of understanding, usually the biggest purchases take the most time to evaluate,
yeah, sure,
right? So, you know, after someone sees a house, right? The best real estate agents don't say, "Hey, so are you ready to buy?"
right,
No,
right,
they don't, right? The
yeah,
best ones usually go through a process with you. They let you come back and look at the house a couple times,
right,
right? And
yeah.
so, you have to have that discipline. I think you hit it right on the head. It's discipline to say, hey, I would love to show you a demo, but I also don't want to waste your time, right? I'm not
Yeah.
sure how many demos you sat through that was just a waste of time because
Yeah, yeah.
someone didn't get the right information. But, I'm not even 100% confident that what we have may be the best for you, right? And so,
Yeah.
it depends on again, it's a lot of this is adding the fadeaway jumper into your bag, right?
Mm.
But you'll get to understand who you're speaking to and what type of personas you're working with in those conversations to know when you can say things like that. But in that first call, all of the sales experts out there definitely recommend not showing a demo in the first call. Give them some time to think about it, get them excited, right, to want to talk to you again. And that's the crumbs that we're talking about, right? How can
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
leave them a little bit more crumbs to get them more excited to talk to us again?
Yeah, final thought on this one topic. Part of it is using that time to you know pun intended here, drop a seed in their mind,
Mm-hmm.
and let them start thinking about the problem in the way that you've helped them understand
That's
it.
good.
Go back and kind of look at their, because we got to remember everybody's focused on themselves,
Yep.
right? They've got their priorities, they got their obligations, they got outside of work stuff. So they're only thinking about you when they're talking to you and maybe when they see your email come through. But if you leave them with new ideas about how to see their problem, their situation, then it makes them start seeing things a little bit differently, right? And it sets them up much better for a demo later if they want to do that. And I think, the other thing I'll just drop in here around the features part, like the featured
Mm.
vomit stuff,
Mm-hmm.
is, again, it's so common, is that you have to remember if you're a startup, your product might have some interesting features,
Mm-hmm.
but I guarantee you other products out there have those features or they have a lot more features.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's you're probably up against some established players who've got very robust things and you're trying
Mm-hmm.
to carve out a narrow sliver of their audience so you could serve better in a specific way. So
Right.
you're not gonna compete feature to feature typically.
No. No, you're not.
It's much more about that payoff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, do you think that there's a minimum viable sales playbook that every startup should have before they start scaling? And what should be in that?
Yeah. Ian, I want to say hell yes.
Great.
Yes, there is, right? So seriously, a lot of the accelerators that we work with, those directors or program managers of those accelerators and those ESOs, entrepreneurship support organizations, a lot of times they know that their founders don't have a sales playbook, and that's why I think what we're doing is very different because we're coming in the door, giving them a great place to start, right? And so before you even think about scaling sales, you need at least these things. You need an ideal customer profile layout, which is basically detailing who you are selling to, the industry, the role, the pain points, and the buying triggers. You need messaging and positioning, right? What do you say in cold emails? What do you say in calls? And what do you say in demos, right? Like that needs
Yeah.
to be laid out. You need a sales process. So your playbook should show you what steps you all take from first touch to close deal, right? And also mirror how your customers buy. This is very important. You need to have a layout of objection handling, right? So what are the common reasons that your buyers might say no, and how do you all address them? The last thing you want to
Yeah.
do is get caught not being able to answer that question because that's a
Right.
critical
Right.
moment where you can earn trust or lose it, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then last but not least, it's a basic CRM setup, right? Even if it's just a spreadsheet, you need that to track deals properly, right? So
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
don't have at least these, hiring sales reps won't fix your problem. It just multiplies inefficiencies,
Yeah.
right? And a lot
And
of times, go ahead.
increases your
Yes, please.
burn.
Yeah,
I'm
increases your
saying
burn,
then all of a sudden
right?
you got to pay people who aren't going to be able to do anything because you don't have the tools for them.
Exactly, right. So that's what your sales playbook should hold, right? And if you don't have anyone to help you build out, those playbooks, one, you can reach out to us, of course, but anyone who's in sales, who has a sales mind, they can help you polish the language.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
a great exercise to use against someone or with someone versus you writing that all out in your founder mind, right? You need a
Mhm.
different mind from the customer's perspective that can understand the language and and making sure it resonates with them, because what you think resonates usually most of the
Yeah.
time doesn't resonate.
Yeah, it's almost never what you think it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So I want to unpack a couple of things you mentioned. The first was understanding objections and
Hmm.
anticipating them, right? And that might seem obvious to folks, but um, I think a lot of times when we start selling, especially B2B, right? So we're selling to organizations, businesses. A lot of times you think about their objections to your product or to the
Right,
price. And
right.
And so, yeah, okay, you're going to think about, what do they say if it's a little expensive or something, or, it's missing a feature. Like, obviously, you'll probably think about that. The one thing I see people overlook all the time is the implementation part, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, I came from an ed tech background where
Mm-hmm.
implementation of a product is 90% of the battle because
Mm.
the big concern from the principals or the district leaders is not whether my product does what it says it does. It's usually that you can prove that through a demo, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
will their teachers burn the school down because they have to change their
Mm.
habits and their behaviors and their workflows. And
Right.
so often that is something it's like people, I feel like, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see people putting enough tension on that or at least having an answer ready. It's like, oh, here's
Yeah.
how we're going to train your teachers, not just on how to use this, but also, we were told, our teachers don't even know how to use data yet. So what are
Wow.
they going to use with like a data platform? It's like,
Right.
oh, okay. But there's an opportunity there, right? It's like, okay, well,
Absolutely.
now I can develop, data training or whatever and use that as a lot of things. But do you see that
Yeah.
too? People forget that human part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point, what you're talking about is highlighting the partnership inside of the transaction, right? This
Yeah.
is more of a we want to be long-term strategic growth partners with you, right? And we want to hold your hand through the process to make sure that you're getting the most that you can, right? One of the five laws of stratospheric success in the book The Go Giver, which I absolutely love for anyone who is likes quick reads that give you
What's it
just like
called? What's it called?
The Go Giver.
Go Giver. Okay.
The Go Giver, yes. It talks about adding more value than you receive in compensation, right? And
Mm,
so if you
yeah.
can approach that, right, approach that conversation with that in mind, we can easily think about customer support, ongoing support, implementation, being able. Now, all right, cool, you got this data, but now what do you do with it, right?
Yep. Yep.
So there's so much opportunity, but that's the mindset that if we can like turn on as founders, we'll get raving reviews and of course testimonials and referrals, right? Because people understand that, oh wow, this like they care, right? And we
Yeah.
don't have to be just sellers. Hey, we're
Right.
done. We're trying to
Right.
hit a number, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. I think a lot of times we build a product and you think it's okay, this is a tool and I just need them to add this to their toolkit. It's like a hammer. They're going to have a
Right.
hammer and then they'll use it. But it's like you also want to think about, okay, well, do they already have a hammer? When do they
Right.
going to use the hammer? What's the conditions and the circumstances that they're going to
Mm-hmm.
have? That when are they going to have the hammer when they actually need the hammer? And
Right.
does everybody know how to use one? It's all
Mm-hmm.
these things that
Yep.
if you don't think about, so much time gets put into product design and
Yeah.
development and the user journey through the product,
Mm-hmm.
but not enough time oftentimes is the user journey to the product
Mm.
and with the product, in their
Mm-hmm.
larger business setting, right? Because we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about business folks here who are using it to get work done to reach other goals.
Right.
It's not like this product for B2B is usually like the end goal. No, they're out there trying to sell their stuff. And so really
Yeah.
understanding the circumstance, that situational awareness is super important. The other thing you
I
mentioned,
agree.
which I wanted to ask about was, I think you said buying triggers. Did I get that right?
Yeah,
Or,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, tell me more about that.
Well, the buying triggers, so first we were talking about the sales playbook, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think just to make sure that I'm right, I don't know where I was
So you
referencing
were we
buying
were talking
triggers.
about the sales playbook, and you were breaking down the ICP, the ideal customer profile,
Yep.
understanding how they think, what their pain points are, and then you mentioned this term buyer triggers.
Yes. Yep, you're right. So yeah, when you're looking at that ICP and you're breaking down who you're selling to,
Hmm.
the buying triggers can be a lot of different things, right? Sometimes you'll see in certain platforms when you're code outreaching that they have a feature within the email automation platform that says, that it's like a turn on for buying triggers, and you can set up what those buying triggers are. So if you have a product that's complementary to another product, and if someone has that product already in their tech stack, you know that they're great potential customers for you all because you work
Yep.
very well with that product. That's a buying trigger, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
That could be one type of buying trigger. Another buying trigger could be hiring, right? Maybe
Mm.
your solution is really great for companies that have more than 5 employees within their HR department,
Sure.
right? That could be a buying trigger, right? So there's a lot of different cases of what those buying
Yeah.
triggers are, but knowing what they are helps you to quickly be able to identify, okay, if I'm putting this line out there in the water, where the most fish is going to be that could
Got
potentially
it. Got
bite
it.
right on this hook.
Yeah.
That's what we mean by buying triggers.
Gotcha. So these are the things like the nuances about their circumstance that make them an even better match for what we're talking about. It's really that's
Exactly.
where ideal customer profile comes into play. It's like,
Yes.
oh, you're already set up on, Salesforce, and we're only integrated with Salesforce, and we're specialized for that.
Mm-hmm.
Buying trigger. Like this makes you perfect for this. Okay, I got
Yes.
you. Got
Exactly.
it. Got it. Okay. So my next question is around. Okay, this is a good one. I'm curious. So obviously, early stage founders and salespeople in general, but you hear no a ton, right? You hear it all the time when you're
Yeah,
selling.
that's normal. Right.
And if you're not hearing it, then either I want to buy a piece of your company or you're not actually selling to anyone. Uh, but I'm
Right.
curious if, from your personal experience and or from founders you've helped,
Mm-hmm.
what's the harshest piece of feedback or even interaction you've had during a sales process, and how did you react to that?
Um, I had um a founder was going through a sales process and they were told, like, just straight up, this sounds like a science project, not a business.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, that's pretty
That's a
brutal.
gut punch. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal. But I think that the feedback was spot on in our
Mhm.
one-on-one, because the founder was just too deep in the weeds of their tech,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they hadn't clearly articulated the business value. And
Yeah.
so instead of like shutting down, they took that feedback and rebuilt their pitch around
Yeah.
a real bit, like a real business impact, right?
Got it.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's when
That's rough.
I felt for them because that was very rough. But
Yeah.
this goes back to us, writing out the ideal customer profile and understanding their challenges and their
Yeah.
objectives and how we solve those
Right.
problems that can help them reach those goals. And that's why the playbook is so important.
Yeah. Are there any stories from when you were a salesperson that you can remember where somebody just really like was not into it and said something that stuck in your mind?
um to be honest, to this day I have not carried a brutal no. I have carried a lot of, ghosting. For me, it's been the
Yeah.
opposite where, I do really well at getting the information and then, aligning the solution to the pain. And
Yeah.
then people start to feel guilty that the answer isn't yes because maybe some of the back end work that they had to do in order to get something across the line didn't go through, or there's been a shift, and they kind of feel
Yeah. Yeah.
bad because like, hey, I built this relationship with this person who I like
Right.
to talk to, and then I can't give them and for me, you can just tell me no softly, right? Just say, hey, so this isn't a good time. But
Yeah.
my the most gut punches for me come from just radio silence. I
Yeah,
mean,
again, it's like
that's
ghosting. Ghosting can be
yeah,
crippling.
it
It can
really
kill your
can.
confidence. I had a school district which was one of the top 50 size wise in the country,
Mm-hmm.
and they loved our product. They actually
Mm-hmm.
we were doing email marketing blasts, and they responded like same day, booked the demo within 24 hours. And when
Yeah.
we talked to them, they were like, "This is exactly what we've been looking for. This is like a
Oh
dream
man.
come true." They used all the language. I'm like, "Holy shit, we're about to land the biggest customer we can land."
Yeah.
I don't even think we could do
Seriously.
it.
Yep.
And then after a few weeks, like we had a couple of back and forths. They were like, "Oh, I got to get
Mm-hmm.
this team involved, whatever." And then they
Mm-hmm.
just ghosted me. I tried everything. Like I emailed,
Wow.
every whatever 5, 7, 10 days, whatever. I called them. I called multiple people on their team because it
Yep.
was just too big for me not to try.
Yeah.
And it never went anywhere. They never responded. And
It's
it's
the
just
worst.
because, yeah, I mean, but you know, the thing is, I also know that I actually could, because it was such a big district, you could
Mm-hmm.
see what was going on. They were in the state of Florida, and the Florida state legislature was having major budget issues around education, so they hadn't passed their budget yet. I
Mm-hmm.
knew that this district was also now in a lawsuit for something else. So it's like there's a
Oh
lot of
wow.
other factors at play
Yep.
that can completely derail any sort of sales conversation, let alone mine.
Yeah.
Um, and that's one of the things I learned about sales that really blew my mind. It
Mm.
was, and tell me if this stat sounds right to you, but I read somewhere that 60% of sales are lost not to competition, but to inaction. Just people
Mm,
not making a choice. They
mm,
stick with their current whatever,
right,
process. Does that,
right.
check out in your mind?
Yeah, I think it kind of does, right? 'Cause there's so many factors, so many things have to go right in order for some of these big deals to convert, right?
Yeah.
But I think inaction is one of the big factors. We try really hard to make sure that founders are asking questions around same state results. Like
Mm,
we like to equip founders with questions that could help them avoid that or help them voice that out loud, so that when the customers are thinking about potentially staying in the same place, they know what that means for them, and then the founders can walk away knowing, hey, well, if they decide, then basically they're signing up for whatever world that is. And so that question is something
gotcha.
simple: what happens if this stays the same, right? What happens if you guys don't do anything about this, right? And if
Yeah.
that pain isn't big enough, then that's also an indicator that that's probably not somewhere you
Right.
should
It's a
continue
great
to use your
qualifying question.
yeah,
I'm
for
sure.
sure.
Yeah, I love that same state question. Yeah. Okay. That makes total sense to me. I wish I had known that
Hmm.
3 years ago. Uh,
Hindsight
okay. So
2020.
I also will tell you that I've had really harsh feedback, but mostly from investors or advisors
Mm,
and not from, people you're selling to. They usually, just like you were saying, like I'm personable enough that,
hmm.
we'd have a nice rapport, but they would never kind of spit in my face,
Right.
like, pseudo advisors have before. I had
Uh-huh.
somebody once tell me, they're like, this idea is horrible.
Wow.
And I was like, okay,
Wow.
thanks.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
that's helpful. But this is another reason why, though, to go back to the mindset piece,
Hmm.
especially if you're not a trained salesperson, like you haven't built up that skin and that understanding that sales is about at bats, right? You need
Hmm.
at bats, even
Yes.
if you are a perfect fit. Sometimes you just don't land the pitch, right? Or
Right,
sometimes your
right.
pitch just needs work. And so that's why generating leads is so important. So it gives you at bats.
Yes.
And there's a lot of sales books and literature out there. It's like, it takes 7 or 10 leads or something to get to a yes. I don't know what it is, but
Hmm.
it depends on your industry. But the idea
Yes.
being, there's optimistic salespeople who are like,
Hmm.
they know, all right, it's going to take me 7 no's before I get to a yes. So if they get a no, they just say, all right, well, I'm one step closer to yes because I only got 6 more no's to go, right? And
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
kind of the attitude you got to take. And if you don't qualify leads,
Hmm.
you're setting yourself up for a lot more no's that will get you to start questioning yourself and
Yep.
questioning your product when in reality it might just not be a good fit, right?
Exactly. Yep.
I'm assuming in the startups you work with now, I can't imagine some of them come to you in like a place of extreme confidence out of the gate.
No.
Do they tell you like, oh, we've been banging our head against the wall and nothing's been working? Like, how's that looked on the confidence side
Oh,
for folks?
yeah, all the time. I think the reason why, there's a big market for these outbound tools, from AI to, just email automation and how easy it is
Yep.
for you to scale, right? There's a big market out there because they make it seem as if it's so easy, right? For
Right.
you to be able to generate leads from their products. But to be honest with you,
Yep.
that's a whole skill set in itself. And so, yeah, a lot of founders hop out there, they buy these $15 a month tools or $30 a month tools, and they try stuff over and over again. And they're like, we don't know what's wrong. I mean, there could be 30 things wrong with your email, right? It could be subject
Yeah.
lines, it could be how long your email is, it could be not your website could be not optimized for
Yep.
outbound. Like, there's so many different factors. But I totally agree with you. You need the at bats. And at the end of the day, you know, I help founders understand that if you get 10 calls, you're in your mind, if you close 20% out of the 10, then you did a damn good job with that 10, right? Like
Yeah.
that's typical, right? Two out of
Right.
every 10. So that means you have an expectation that 8 are going to fall off. It's very rare that all 10 fall off. Very rare.
Sure.
So of course, you may have some that get to proposal, and that's what's going to hurt the most, right? Because when we generate proposal, we believe that it's probably going to close.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
deal stages should reflect conversion probability. So
Right.
if
Right.
someone makes it to proposal, there's still a 70% chance. There's a 70% chance that they're going to buy, but there's a 30% chance they won't.
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
And
it's
so
the
we've got to
roughest when
live.
you've got one. Yeah.
And so
And
we
they
gotta
don't
live with
close.
that
Ugh.
reality, right? That I might have some proposals that don't buy, right? But
Yeah.
if you understand that and remove your emotions away from it, it will definitely help you, navigate that month or that quarter for sure. Because you're just
Yeah.
looking at the numbers, you're just looking at the at bats.
Right. And it's also why you have to be so honest with yourself. It's like somebody might be listening to this and saying, "Oh, well, I've sent 20 proposals and I haven't gotten any sales yet." It's like, okay, well, two things. First, something's probably not right,
Yeah, for
aligned.
sure, for sure.
And second, it doesn't we're not what we're saying is because I've done this once before. Not
Hmm.
once, I've probably done this many times, but where it's like, all right, you know what, let me send you a proposal, right?
Mm.
And you send it even though it's not really what
Oh
they're
man.
not really asking for it yet. And so
Yep.
now you might be saying, oh, we got to propose. I sent proposals to 20 leads. And it's like, yeah, but were you at that stage yet where actually a proposal
Right.
was even relevant?
Yeah. And did you
Because I,
walk them through the proposal?
I
Because
mean, again, it's
another
like,
golden rule is don't send proposals.
okay.
That's another golden rule, right? So if you're
We
just sending
need we need
proposals out there,
a true seed 10 commandments here.
yeah,
That's what we need to
yeah, we
build.
do, we do.
We're gonna
Because
do
I
that.
tell every founder, do not send proposals that you do not walk through with the prospect over a call. Do not,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because every single time you're meeting with that prospect, you've got to recap what we've done and what we figured out and
Sure.
what we're saying. What like this is a relationship. Every time we talk, we're building upon what we just had a meeting about, right? So
Yeah.
the way you execute your proposal stage is very critical. So you're right. There's an indicator. If you've got 20 proposals out there and nothing closed, something is really wrong. You need to bring someone in to help you figure out what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. This is such gold that I hope I can get this in front of so many people. All right.
Me
So
too.
so
Same.
this is a good segue to when a founder, and I laugh because we all make this mistake, but when should a founder consider actually hiring their first professional salesperson?
Mm-hmm.
And what are there signs that indicate they're ready for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's two. It's two signs, two or signals, if you will, right?
Yeah.
One, you have a repeatable sales process. That's the
Okay.
first one, right? If you're still figuring out how to sell your product, hiring a salesperson isn't going to solve that.
Mm,
That is the misconception, right? That's the myth, right?
yeah.
Founders should close the first 10 to 20 deals themselves to lock in messaging and process.
Yeah.
Then they can bring in the sales executive to repeat that, right? The second signal is you have to have more leads than you can handle, right? If your pipeline is filling up and sales is becoming a bottleneck for you, then it's time to bring somebody in. But you also have to have that repeatable sales process, because the mistake I see a lot is founders hiring those reps too early and then expecting them to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
that
Right.
that almost never works, because
Yeah.
salespeople execute. They don't build your process from scratch. That's your job. Your job is
Yeah.
to build the environment, right, for all the nice little expensive fishies to come in and thrive, right?
Hmm.
And so you don't go buy the fish first and then the aquarium. You buy the aquarium, you get the
Yeah.
water, the filtration, right, the algae, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then once that's working and that's going, you're like, okay, cool. Now I can go get the
Right.
fish
And
to put
you,
in
once
here.
you are living in it,
Yeah,
right?
and you
Like,
have to live in it as well, right? Like,
yeah, you
does
have
it
to be able to
work?
survive in the ecosystem first, right?
Exactly, right. And so
Yeah.
you're the first account executive of your startup. You,
Right.
right? And so if you want to duplicate that success, you got to have something for them to follow. And so, you can save so much, resources and frustration and demoralize, account executives and brand reputation just by not hiring that first sales rep too early.
Yeah, and I have made this mistake myself, and it cost us significantly
Wow.
because, yeah, I mean, we just, we needed to grow sales. Ed tech was what I'm referring to, but it's a tough space sales wise. You got to really know what you're doing, and so we went out and we thought we had the product to a place where it was clear enough what it was.
Hmm.
But to your point, we did not have a repeatable sales cycle, which means we didn't have a clear set of steps that we go through with a sales prospect, right? Call, demo, proposal, close, whatever it is. We didn't have that yet. We also didn't have a robust lead generation tool model setup process. we had started to do email marketing and we were
Mhm.
getting some leads there, but it wasn't fine tuned, and we certainly weren't drowning in leads. And to your
Most
point
are.
though,
Most are.
no, of course not. And to your point though, we brought on a salesperson who had a lot of experience
Hmm.
and experience in our space.
Hmm.
Great. But they hadn't been responsible for lead generation in a long time,
Hmm.
right? Because they had been an account executive, to your point, and they weren't. But we didn't. We thought they were going to help us generate leads, and so that's one of the biggest things I see all the time is they bring in the salesperson because they need someone to generate leads, and they think a salesperson is going to do it. And in
Hmm.
reality, it's like no, that's more of an SDR or BDR, and you're probably not ready to hire them either because you still need to figure out how to generate them,
Yes,
right?
you. Yes.
Yeah. So it's and it can be killer, right? Killer.
Yeah.
I've had so many people I've talked to, they're like, I just need a salesperson. And to me, that says you are afraid of rejection
Mm.
and you need to step back and learn how to do sales because you can't, to your point, like you can't buy a fish and then tell the fish to build the aquarium that it's going to live in,
That doesn't
right?
make any sense at all, right?
Yeah, like
I,
a salesperson comes in and is like, okay, my livelihood depends on me closing deals,
right.
not building your process,
Oh yeah. Well, I
right?
mean, yeah. You open up a can here, Ian, because let's also think about, if we go back to what you said earlier about being humble, right?
Yeah.
It takes account executives, people in the world of sales, it takes them sometimes up to 7 to 10 years before they're sales managers, let alone sales directors. When
Wow.
you
Yeah.
go and hire an account executive, you're immediately putting yourself in a position of being a sales director. And most founders have no experience directing anything when it comes to
Yeah.
sales,
It's a great point. Never
right?
thought of
And
it like
so
that.
you're
Yeah.
you're jumping ahead, right? Like you're not going to be able to lead someone effectively if you've never done something successfully that you're asking for them to do, right?
Right.
It
Right.
challenges. The best coaches in basketball are the ones who actually play the game,
hmm
right?
Yeah.
And so, like, you got to go out there and put some numbers up yourself to get that respect, because a lot of account executives, this is very cutthroat for them. This is their livelihood that
Yeah.
depends on, closing deals, right? And so,
Right.
the great thing about it is that founders can, they can jump, they can kind of skip the line a little bit to get in that position. But a lot of that sales culture that ruins a lot of startups usually comes from sales directors being hired in those positions and leading those account executives and asking them to do things that they have not proven themselves as a company that they can do with
hmm
or without this account executive, right? If you want that account executive to come in and build something for you, pay them for it, right? Pay
Sure.
them for it. Yeah, let them know that, hey, we're figuring this out. We need your help to build our sales playbook, right? We need
Yeah.
you more of a consultant as well. Here's the
Yeah.
last thing I will say. Most founders also ask for those account executives to not only close, not only help them figure out the sales process, but then go get their own leads,
Right.
right?
Right.
That's three jobs in one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Now,
wild.
but that's really crazy, because usually you had to pay someone like $120,000 a year to do all those things, right?
Yeah.
So my recommendation is, one, look for fractional SDRs, right?
Mm.
Look for, SDRs who can test language for you, right? Where, you don't have to spend that much. Usually really good SDRs are somewhere around like 60 to 70K a year, right? You can probably, get someone for half of that or a fraction of that. And then practice through those at bats, get your discos down, get your proposals down, get your close rates down. And then once you have that and it's built out, then you can bring someone in, and then account executive can put their eyes on it and say, hey, have we tried this? Have we tried this? Let me try that. Be open to feedback, because your account executive is telling you how they can help you make more money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I love
That's
that.
that
Yeah.
that that's a big piece of it, right? Just being open to that feedback. Their experience in selling, your world, or your experience in building products, right? So you all should be a team, right? You should be
Yeah.
a team,
Yeah.
right? You're not a
Right.
manager. That's your teammate.
Yeah. You have to respect it just like you respect product development.
Yes.
Hopefully,
Hopefully,
and
right. That's not
yeah.
something that's typical in
No,
this
no, it's
world.
not. And he goes, you're basically, and again, your sales organization, if you're a B2B model, is
Mm-hmm.
everything. Like that is
Mm-hmm.
going to be what your entire business is driven by, right? It's sort of
Yep.
the engine that drives everything else. That gets you, if your shiny car is the company and the product is the experience of being with your company, then the engine is what drives it, what moves it.
Which is
And
sales.
yeah, sales are those people.
Yeah.
And, you can't just pay people to come in and build an engine from scratch when their skill set is actually driving, right?
Yep.
It's like,
Yep.
so we've covered a lot of metaphors here. I think all of them are great. We had doctors, Tinder, and now cars.
Yep.
But
And
hopefully they're
basketball
helpful.
players.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, there's always got to be sports in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so quick recap, and then we're gonna go to my final rapid fire questions here.
Okay.
So a couple of the golden rules you mentioned: no demo on the first call.
Correct.
Forever.
Forever.
Idea is that first call is really just understanding if what their problem is, how they see it, if it's a good alignment to what you have, and if not, then they qualify them out. Another golden rule you mentioned was never send a proposal you haven't already walked through with the person on the call. Right.
Correct. Yes. Golden rule.
Because that way, and to my own credit, I actually did eventually start doing that and stop sending proposals. But the point is you want to be able to walk it through so they clearly understand what you're giving them, so they don't start building narratives in their own head about what something means or what something's going to cost.
Right.
It's so they understand what you're saying, and so you give them some context that they can then go advocate on behalf of the deal too, because I'm sure they have to go and talk to people too, probably.
Absolutely.
Right. A third thing, maybe not a golden rule, but just rule of thumb, let's say, you said that the founder really should try to close 10 to 20 deals before they even consider hiring an outside salesperson.
Absolutely.
Again, general rule, but if you've been able to generate 10 to 20 deals, that means you've probably generated, 100 to 150 leads, right? And it shows that, okay, you've generated a lot of leads. You've been able to actually close a high percentage of those leads. And that means you've probably discovered a process that, while not perfect, certainly can produce results. And that you could hand to somebody more easily. Okay, cool. Yeah. Any other golden rules before we go to our rapid fire sessions?
I think those are our three heavy hitters.
Okay,
those are
great.
Good.
So first question, I don't know why I call these rapid fire, because they're not going to be like one answer. But what's the worst sales advice you've ever heard given to a founder?
Worst sales advice ever given to a founder that I've heard. Wow. Wow, this is really tough. Because most of the founders in my experience aren't getting a lot of advice about sales. They're kind of doing it themselves, right? There's also
go ahead.
I was going to say, from my research online, there isn't a lot of material or resources out there for founders in regards to sales either. So I think hiring, right, is probably one of them. Just go ahead and hire someone. If we give you this funding, then you should use that to go get salespeople. That's bad advice, right? Because the VCs are not qualifying whether or not you're ready to go hire someone based off of your experience of selling.
Spoiler alert, investors, VCs particularly, know a lot less about you and what you are capable of than you think.
Absolutely. Yes, correct.
They do a lot less due diligence than they should most of the time.
It might be that hiring piece, man, honestly.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Next question is, again, I actually don't like this question. I'm reading it.
Okay.
Cold emails or warm intros, which one would you prioritize if time and resources are limited?
Well, I'm curious. Why don't you like that question?
I just think that, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of context that would be relevant to understanding that. I guess it's really, we're talking about is it worth putting time trying to find warm intros, or is it better to just try to reach directly out to people via cold emails?
I think you have to have all the lines in the water, honestly, right? I think this is a good question because sometimes we get too focused on one strategy, and when it comes to generating leads, we've got to have a couple different strategies all running, right? We've got to have a place where we're kind of building community, where we're establishing ourselves as thought leaders, or we're giving, our buyer personas the space to be able to interact with us and with each other, right? We've got to have some type of cold outbounding going on, whether that's LinkedIn connections or DMing. We've got to have a little bit of outbound email. We've got to have some ads that we're paying for, right? And we're just testing a lot of this stuff. Now, of course, you're going to graduate to having more lines in the water, and basically what we're saying, opening up more channels. As you you are having more success, and hopefully the revenue that you're, that you're winning from closed deals, you're putting that into marketing. But at the end of the day, I would say that founders in their early stages need to focus on leveraging the power that they have with their title, being a founder, right? And what I mean by that is you should be spending the first 2 to 3 hours of your day each day, even if you have to give up a little bit earlier, prospecting yourself. That's what a lot of founders are not doing. They're not prioritizing their prospecting in the world where prospecting the best as far as conversion is on LinkedIn, right? So I would say LinkedIn DMing and just connecting and then having real authentic conversations there. That you're going to see the biggest return for time investment in that space. So cold outreach to me is not dead.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, you got to try everything early on, right? And see what works.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there is there one big misconception about B2B sales that you wish more founders understood? And feel free to repeat anything that we've said already if you want to double tap on it.
Yeah, man. Honestly, it's the you're not years away, you're skills away, right?
Yeah, that's a great phrase.
That's the biggest one for me, man. You're just a couple skills away. You just need to embrace getting a coach, right? That's a big misconception that you can just step in that game and just automatically. I think it's the pressure that founders put on themselves, like, oh, I'm the CEO, so I got to run sales and I got to be the one to do this and do that and do that. And if we could just approach that with a little bit more humility to say, hey, let me get a coach to kind of teach me how to do this right. Again, it's like, it's the NASCAR analogy. I don't know if a lot of people know, but they teach the NASCAR drivers to slow down at certain spaces, and so they can actually speed up when they're driving, right? And those are like sometimes in like turns and different things like that. But in this case, this is slowing down by saying, if I can get someone to kind of advise me that's experienced in being a sales director and kind of give me the strategy and allow me to test, and then they can sharpen what I need to do, then I'll be able to have a lot more success, the more that I continue to pump out.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think another part of that for founders is to recognize that once you start selling your product, there becomes this mental thing where it's like, I need to put time every day into outreach every day, right? And anytime I'm not spending on sales outreach is time I'm losing to potential sales. And what I would say to that thinking is that it's not correct.
Yeah, right.
Time spent on building an understanding of your customer, of prospecting, of building a playbook, or at least a theoretical one that you can test, right? All of that stuff is really important and valuable. And it'll save you a lot more time, make you more effective than just spending all day, every day emailing random people, right? It's the analogy I use in a different conversation was like around Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel. People don't realize that to paint the Sistine Chapel, the first thing you had to do was spend months building the scaffolding to even get up there.
Wow.
And you can really think about, you've got to spend time building that playbook. That's that structure that will get you to a place where you can actually do the thing, right? And it'll pay huge dividends if you take that time to invest in yourself and developing your skills. Coaches are obviously a huge help in that regard. Even though as founders, we have this sort of cultural training that like, oh, I'm not supposed to spend money on myself. It's got to be like on the business, and
that's
it's
crazy.
Like you are the business in the beginning, right?
Right.
So I'm all for that. All right, well, Seth, this has been awesome, and I'm going to wrap up this conversation. Again, I'm with Seth Banks from True Seed. So whether you're a founder just starting to build your sales strategy or one struggling to close those critical early deals, Seth's obviously got insights that are a powerful reminder that great sales starts with clarity and execution. So if you found this conversation helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, leave a review. It makes a huge difference. For more on how Seth and True Seed can help you, definitely check out TrueSeedGroup.com. That's TrueSeedGroup.com. And I guarantee you Seth will be back for future episodes. We didn't even talk about pricing and all this other stuff. So we'll get into that another time. Yeah, plenty of stuff to go on. But Seth, thanks so much again. And thanks everybody for listening. As always, keep building your vision and let's get back out there and build the future.
Good luck, guys.
Thanks you.